Thanks for joining. My name is Liz Bierce. I am Vice President of Marketing here at Lydonia Technologies. And we are so excited to have such a diverse group of people attending today. We truly appreciate you taking the time to learn more about Robotic Process Automation, or RPA, a truly transformational technology that is particularly well suited for credit unions. All right, and so with that, we'll walk through today's agenda. I am here kicking it off, and then I'm going to hand it over to Mark Sievewright, founder and CEO of Sievewright and Associates. Mark's going to talk about credit union technology trends. And then we're going to hear from Bill Hincher, Senior Industry Practice Manager at UiPath. He's going to discuss automation for credit unions. And then from there, Steve Roach, Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Transformation Officer of Valley Strong Credit Union, and Steve Sadler, our own Chief Revenue Officer here at Lydonia Technologies. We'll talk about the automation journey at Valley Strong Credit Union. And then after that, we'll get into some Q&A. I'm going to kick it over to Mark Sievewright to take us through credit union technology trends.
Hey, thanks, Liz. Hello, everyone. Great to join you today. And Liz, I saw some good news for you guys today on social media.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out. We are very excited here at Lydonia Technologies to announce that we were named, and we are so honored to be named, on Inc. Magazine's annual list of best workplaces for 2022. We're just so proud of that, and just wanted to share that with you. So thanks for asking, Mark. So I'll kick it right back over to you.
Great, thanks, Liz. Jump right in, and good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are today. Many of you have heard me speak on the credit union circuit before, and it will come as no surprise to you to hear that I believe we are in the midst right now of a paradigm shift in financial services. I am not exaggerating. I'm not embellishing. We are going through the most significant change that we can remember in our lifetimes. Now, let's talk through the trends that are driving this. I was just reading NCUA data this morning. It's kind of what you do, right, on a Tuesday morning, and saw that the pace of consolidation in our movement accelerated in the first quarter this year. So the first trend, Liz, if you could just hit that for me, the first trend that we're looking at is increasing consolidation and the drive for scale in our industry. We have below 5,000 credit unions today, everyone. Kind of remarkable for those of us who've been around the movement for a few decades to think about that. By the time we get to 2030, there'll be fewer than 3,000 credit unions. And what we can see already is that the nature of consolidation is changing. My good friend Steve Roach, who you'll hear from shortly, has been part of that consolidation at Valley Strong, bringing Financial Center into their world recently. We just saw a huge merger in New York between two multi-billion-dollar credit unions. And I really believe that that merger of equal philosophy will continue as we move forward through the rest of the decade. The next trend, obviously, is technology. And if you think the pace of technology change is fast, today's the slowest it's going to be for the rest of your lives. Some of you on here, like my good friend Gina Olson from SAFE, have recently gone through some major technology upgrades, like changing their core system over there in Folsom, California. And that's just the beginning of a transformational journey for a credit union like SAFE and others that are on this call. Consumers are changing too. It's not just about COVID. COVID accelerated investments in digital banking and electronic payments without any doubt, but those changes were already there. We're already seeing a movement towards digital first at the consumer and business level. You know, recently I was asked by Visa to be a part of a CEO forum, and one of the CEOs asked me during that forum, what was the future of the plastic card? And I said, it doesn't have a future. Not a really good thing to say at a payment systems event, right? My point in that was not that plastic cards are going away, but over the long haul, we will routinely make payments using electronic media, and perhaps even our own biometrics, with plastic card payments diminishing. That's just one example of consumer behaviors changing. And for many of you with interchange revenue at stake, it's a very significant one. The next trend is competition. My goodness, if I looked at the competitive roadmap for credit unions a decade ago, it would have taken me about 10 minutes to figure out your primary competitors in each of your markets. If you ask me to do that exercise today, You could come back tomorrow and I'd still be working on it. Such is the nature of competitive change. It's not just the big banks or the big regionals or community banks that we're competing with these days. It's the fintechs. It's thousands of organizations that in some way or other, if you examine your consumer or member data records, you will see that at least a third of your members today have at least one fintech relationship. I call it the Trojan horse strategy because once these fintechs, many of which are monoline product issuers today, get inside our base, they will want to add more and more products to that member relationship before they hit regulatory barriers or walls that will force them to change into a properly regulated financial institution. The final trend, and we can all relate to this, the conveyor belt of life, right? And there are major demographic shifts going on in the United States today. For me, the most significant is that we have almost 170 million Americans who are millennials or Gen Zers. Let's call them MZers just for the sake of this session today. This group is like no other group we've seen before, especially at the younger end of that cohort. They are digital natives by nature. They've grown up digital, especially the Gen Zers. And that has significant implications for our future branch strategies too, as we strike a balance between physical interaction and digital interaction. In all of this, the member experience is paramount. And I'm an absolute believer that RPA, as we'll talk about and you'll hear from Bill and Steve, is actually a really important component to not just automating and driving efficiency, but actually improving the back office operation that we have at our credit union, and therefore improving the member experience. I call it putting an end to mullet banking. My friend Steve Roach has heard me say this before. Mullet hairstyles look great from the front. I apologize for anyone out there who might have one or aspire to have one. But from the back, those hairstyles are a holy mess. The front of our credit union looks great, our branches, our websites, our digital banking solutions. But the back office is typically full of poor integration, multiple systems in silos, and a lot of business process that needs to go away because it's repetitive and mundane. So I'm privileged to work with a lot of credit unions around the country on strategic planning. And on this next slide, I'm going to summarize my comments for today, at least, by showing you just a single page view of what everything I hear in these strategic planning sessions looks like. I could take all of those sessions and summarize them in this single slide. As you look at this as credit union leaders, I'm certain you'll recognize yourselves in here. Now, the circles that you see across the center represent key initiative areas that each of you in some way or other are pursuing today. Now, some of those circles will be larger for some of you than others. Many of you will be focused on driving exceptional member experiences, while others perhaps are going through a merger or looking at other ways to drive scale. But in one way or another, I believe that these 5 strategic areas are vital to you, and they're underpinned by technology, strategy, and execution, part of which is RPA. And of course, in this digital world of ours, people continue to be the difference. And people make the difference each and every day in our organizations. So with that said, I appreciate the folks at Lydonia inviting me along today. Thank you, Steve. And I'm really excited to hear from Steve and Bill. Thanks, Liz.
Thank you. Had to come off mute. All right. And now that was great. I love the mullet comment. That's
all everyone will remember, Liz. The
that's
whole
a good
thing
one.
just comes down to that.
Next up, we have automation for credit unions with Bill Hincher from UiPath.
Thanks, Liz. You know, credit unions and financial services broadly represent our largest and fastest growing vertical within UiPath. So we've got an extensive amount of experience in these conversations around what does it really mean to embrace automation and how can it deliver outperformance in comparison to some of those laggards within the industry who haven't necessarily been as quick to adopt the automation trend, right? Typically, when people think about automation, they're hyper-focused on FTE reduction. How can they, take those FTEs out of the workforce and focus on cost savings. But I'd say increasingly over the last 2+ years, we've seen a dramatic shift in terms of the benefits of automation, not on the cost takeout side, but more on the what can we continue to expand in terms of our automation program. Can we deliver better member experiences so that our experiences that our members are engaging with the credit unions are best in class. They're, they set our credit union apart, right? We all know that banking products are fairly commoditized. So how do we differentiate the credit union from every other credit union out there? And it's oftentimes through that member experience, right? So there's a shift to the customer satisfaction side of the equation as opposed to the cost takeout side, right? So we're seeing that continue to be pervasive in every single conversation. Everything that a credit union is doing needs to be hyper focused on the member and how they provide that service in an efficient way to those members. Mark gave a great illustration in terms of that mullet, right? So how do we combine both front and back office operations into a seamless digital experience, right? This has a number of different benefits in terms of being competitive advantage for your firm, allowing you to compete with those fintechs, with newer entrants to the market. How do we combine not only the back office operations with automation on the front end as well? Again, when people think about automation, their mind immediately goes to those back office operations, which, to be honest, as Mark mentioned, are often a mess, right? There's sloppy integrations, disconnected systems. It's a ripe area for automation. But that's not to mention, though, that there's a significant amount of opportunity on the front end as well. You can think about those people within the organization who are engaging with your members on a day-to-day basis, providing really great customer experience. There's a lot of automation opportunity in the front office as well. And we need a way to marry those two and provide a best-in-class operational efficiency for an organization. And then last but not least, we're all feeling the effects of the Great Resignation. It's very challenging to hire and retain top talent in this market. We're often seeing many of our credit union and financial services clients focus on automation as a means to improve the employee experience. So how do we remove some of that mundane work that people are doing every day so that they enjoy coming in and working within our organization, right? They're not looking to leave. We're actually providing a benefit to them. We're saying, tell us what your least favorite activities are in your day-to-day, and we'll work to automate those, right? So that you can focus more on client engagement, higher value-added tasks, allow you to focus more on strategy, analysis, things that you enjoy doing, allowing you, the people, to focus on those things that you do exceptionally well and passing off those mundane activities to robots on the back end. And when we think about those automation opportunities, specifically in terms of areas that we've seen automation being successfully deployed, oftentimes we're seeing the most successful clients starting in the line of businesses. This is in contrast to some of those horizontal functions, things like finance and accounting, HR, IT. Those are all great areas of automation, things that we commonly refer to as low-hanging fruit. But the most significant value and benefit in an automation program has been typically to be focusing on those lines of business, things that have direct impact to your revenue, to your client experience, things like consumer banking, right? If we think about the mortgage originations process, how do we shrink our time to close on a mortgage scenario so that we are now a lender of choice for our members, for our clients, so that they're not looking elsewhere because somebody else can close a loan in 2 weeks instead of 30 to 45 days. So that's one area that we've done a lot of extensive work over the last 3 years to help credit unions be able to improve their originations process and to shrink that time to close and ultimately make it a better experience for the applicant. Other parts of the credit union that we're doing a lot of work in center around the compliance side, which obviously is a big resource constraint type of activity for any sort of organization like a credit union. There's a lot of scrutiny being placed upon what are our compliance checks looking like today? How do we help our compliance analysts make more or spend more time analyzing the data and less time gathering the data? Certainly that's something we see throughout the onboarding cycle. You think about all your know your customer checks, automation is being very effectively deployed in the KYC lifecycle. And then last but not least, We can think about, again, some of that front office activity that we mentioned earlier, things like the call center or in-branch employees. How do we help them focus on the customer and less on, fumbling through different applications? How do we use automation to be the go-between between different applications to give those call center agents, those branch employees, a 360 view of the customer and allow them to focus more of their time on the customer? Those are some of the more key starting points when we think about where do we see the most impact and benefit in terms of starting your automation journey.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Bill. And before we get into Valley Strong Credit Union, I'd love to hit another poll. So Garrett, can you fire up the technology? There we go. What technologies are you currently evaluating? This is so cool to see all these answers coming in. Thank you for the engagement. So while that poll is going on, I am going to go ahead and kick it back to you, Steve Sadler and Steve Roach.
Great. Thank you, Liz, so much. And thanks for everyone for joining us here today. Good afternoon and good morning. One bit on personal information. We are very, very thrilled here at Lydonia Technologies to be the proud recipient of the Inc. magazine Great Best Places to Work today. It is a huge, huge accomplishment by this team and something we're very proud of. And I like to think that one of the reasons that we won that award is because our team members are super engaged and they treat our customers as if they're part of our team. We truly believe that at Lydonia, that the customer is at the center of everything that we do. And that's why we really decided to host this event today. You heard from a couple of industry heavyweights there, Mark Sievewright and Sievewright Associates. They help leading credit unions all over the country really transform and gain competitive advantage and improve member experience. You heard from Bill Hincher from UiPath, who is the clear market leader in automation, intelligent automation technologies that helps businesses of all sizes across all industries really help transform their businesses. And we here at Lydonia have a similar ethos, if you will. We help our customers accelerate their transformation really by unlocking and harnessing the true power of automation. So I mentioned that we're very thrilled to treat our customers like an extension of our team, and we're equally thrilled and proud to have one of our key customers here joining us today. So please join me in welcoming Steve Roach from Valley Strong Credit Union out in the fabulous city of Bakersfield, California. Steve is their Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Transformation Officer. So Steve, welcome and thanks for being here.
Steve, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Great to see you as always. So Steve, maybe we could just start at a real high level here. If you could share with the folks joining us today a little bit about Valley Strong, the journey that you've been on as a business. Clearly, you've been growing rapidly, both organically and through acquisition. I think it would be very interesting for folks to hear a little bit about Valley Strong.
Well, we started about 80 years ago as a teachers credit union. In fact, our first branch was in a janitor's closet, basically, and our first deposit went into a shoebox. So we had very, very humble beginnings. We continued to serve teachers population here in Kern County. About 20 years ago, we applied for a charter change that allowed us to serve pretty much anybody in this county. A couple of years ago, we decided that we were going to need to expand outside of Kern County. So we went through a significant transformation. For most of our life, we've been Kern Schools Federal Credit Union, but in order to move out of the county, we needed to, we required a state charter and a name change. And so our name became Valley Strong Credit Union a little over 2 years ago. And since then, we've grown from 13 branches to 30. We're in 10 counties throughout the central part of California. If those of you who are from or know California, there's a large valley down the middle of the state, and we're in most of that valley. We've grown from 130,000 members to 250,000 members in that same time frame, and from about 1.8 billion to 3.5 billion. So we are experiencing rapid growth. And as you mentioned, that's both through merger and acquisition, as well as de novo branch opening.
Great, thanks, Steve. Yeah, so impressive growth in a very short period of time. And I know you've recently taken on the title of Chief Digital Transformation Officer, and that's something that we don't see across every organization. Could you share a little bit about why Valley Strong, chose to create that position, some of your responsibilities and the challenges and problems you're trying to overcome for the credit union?
Well, I share with people that I was for 8 years prior the Chief Information Officer, and the move to this position I consider time off for good behavior. It really is something that I've always been passionate about, and in this role, I get to be the tip of the technology spear for the organization and leave behind some of the run and maintain responsibility that I had for the organization prior to the job change. So I really found my dream job and enjoy a lot what I'm doing today, and just couldn't be happier.
Great. So what are some of the challenges now that you've been in the role for about a half a year or so, Steve? What are some of the challenges that you've, now that you've got a chance and the new car smell has worn off a little bit, what are some of the things that you've uncovered in this role and some of the challenges that you're trying to solve as part of this transformation initiative inside of Valley Strong?
Well, I think there's two that come to mind. One is talent, and we're always looking for talent, to acquire it and to maintain it. And that, in conjunction with the effort to upskill people that we already have, is a constant struggle for us. And with the ability now to hire people to work remote, it's helped some, but talent, I think, will always be a constraint, especially as we're growing into new technologies. So that's probably number one for me. The second thing is the cultural adaptation to the technology within the organization, and it's both a function of culture and communication and training. And we have established a department specifically to address that within the organization. But I see ourselves and others like us struggle with the cultural change necessary to take full advantage of the technologies that are available to us today.
Great. That's a great segue, Steve. And as we pivot into maybe a little bit of a double click into your automation journey there at Valley Strong. So about a little over a year or so ago, you started down this path. Maybe you could share with the folks a little bit about, what piqued your interest about automation, specifically RPA, what challenges you were trying to solve, and why you thought automation would be a good place to start to solve those challenges.
Well, as the famous poet said, necessity is the mother of invention. And where we found ourselves as we entered the COVID pandemic was trying to figure out how in the heck we were going to do PPP loans. And I'm sure there are other people on the call that faced that same challenge. It was kind of interesting in that the bigger financial institutions in our area didn't want to mess with the small and micro business customers. And so they started to flock to us in large numbers, and we ended up with hundreds, if not thousands, of PPP loans. The only thing that we knew to do at that point was to throw people at the problem. And that's what we ended up doing. We realized that we were going to exhaust our human resource pretty quickly. So we turned to or looked at the possibility of using RPA. Now, I had been studying RPA and looking for opportunities to use it for maybe a year prior. And in fact, I had reached out to UiPath. That's how we became customers of Lydonia, actually. It was their recommendation that we reach out to you. Your team spoke with us and developed a solution that we feel would have worked, except for we saw that we were about to run out of PPP money pretty fast and decided to just write it out. Fast forward a few months later, and we're experiencing a housing boom here in the Southern Valley, probably the entire valley, but certainly in the Southern Valley. It was kind of like a perfect storm. We had people who could now work from home, could move up here and afford a home from LA. We're about 2 hours north of LA for folks that aren't familiar with this part of California. And our home prices here are anywhere from a half to a third of what you would spend in LA to have a home. So very affordable. And now with being able to work from home, location didn't matter so much. So we saw a large influx of people from Southern California coming up here to buy homes. If you combine that with record low interest rates for homes, and the fact that we would only accept a mortgage loan application digitally, our digital channel was flooded. And we think we were losing someplace close to 100 applications a month because we just couldn't get to them. Incomplete applications, just going wanting for a prompting to get the application completed. And that's when we reached back out to Lydonia to help us with this issue.
Great. So it's interesting perspective here. Bill talked about this a little bit earlier, that most people think about RPA as a cost takeout measure in a lot of cases. How can they do labor arbitrage, trading the back office work for digital workers and driving out costs? Your journey started in a little bit of a different place. You were really more focused on driving the top line revenue growth, as well as improving the member experience, as Mark kind of mentioned as well. What are some of the results that you've seen since you've started on this journey and deployed the technology, Steve?
Well, we deployed 2 bots. One bot was to help our members complete the application. We call it the Navigator. It just nags them to get their stuff done. The other bot helps them get the paperwork that we need to do the underwriting in. And we, year over year, saw about a 26% lift in completed applications and funded loans. So it definitely provided not only a solution to the opportunity cost that we were experiencing, but also allowed us to scale. So I have to, if I go into my CFO and say, hey, I got this great technology and it's going to save us 5 FTEs, she'll throw a shoe at me, because we never save FTEs. But gaining scale and addressing an opportunity cost are very much financially solid reasons to invest in the technology.
Absolutely, Steve. Great. So eliminating those stranded mortgages and allowing you to scale without the need to add additional headcount and that cost avoidance. So what's next after the mortgage origination process? I know that you've pivoted into some additional workflows and processes, and you have a myriad of other technology initiatives. Maybe you can share a little bit with the folks about the road ahead and what's coming next.
Well, we're investing in several technologies right now. We're just in the very initial phases of a Salesforce implementation. We're going to be implementing the Financial Services Cloud, the Marketing Cloud, and MuleSoft. So big project for us. We've invested in chatbot technology, trying to alleviate some of the wait times that we have with our contact center. And of course, RPA. Our most recent RPA project involves solar lending. Kind of an interesting story, similar to the mortgage lending process, where we started the solar loan project, not knowing really what to expect, and determined pretty quickly that it was a beast that was going to eat us if we didn't do something about it. So we looked to RPA again. I don't know that much about the solar loan process, but I know it involves 3 parties: the customer, the contractor, and us. And it was that relationship with the contractor that we really used the RPA to solve. It's paper intensive. And so we use RPA to read that paper. With the help of machine learning, we extract the information off that paper that we need and build the profile to create the solar loan. So it's been good. We're still in development, so I can't give you any statistics on its benefit yet, but we know it's going to be beneficial at this point.
Absolutely. And that's the beautiful part about the UiPath platform and automation is as you begin your journey in starting to roll out initial automations, very quickly you start to find new areas in which to automate, right? And the value of these digital workers working alongside of your human workers are they're completely transferable. They don't know that they're a solar digital worker or that they are a mortgage originations digital worker. They can be pivoted to wherever manual processes and tasks are. So that investment that you've made in this technology will definitely augment the human workers and hopefully not only drive member experience, but also employee experience, as well as you can remove a lot of those robotic tasks from these folks so that they're more productive in their roles and they stay, because I know you'd mentioned the talent is one of your key initiatives as well, Steve.
Yeah, and that was very true when the mortgage boom hit. It was very difficult to find mortgage lenders locally, so the automation helped. And I should mention too that the automation freed the frontline people up to actually have the time to provide that personal touch. We didn't want our members to only be processed by a bot. We wanted them to continue to enjoy what makes credit union. We're personal. And so we kept that personal touch and in fact enhanced it because now they weren't busy with the mundane tasks of chasing members to complete applications and send in documents. So important.
Well said. Perfect. So Liz, I think this might be a really good place for us to pause. I'm sure there's some great questions out there from the attendees. Steve, I want to thank you for sharing your perspective, but don't go anywhere too far. I'm sure there's going to be tons of questions there. So Liz, why don't I turn it over to you, and we'll make sure we answer as many of these questions as we can.
Sure. Let's actually start. This one is specific for you, Steve Roach. Steve Roach, you mentioned some specific use cases. For someone unfamiliar with RPA, how would you recommend getting started?
Great question. I can only tell you how we approached it, and we learned enough about the technology to understand its application, and then had the business unit bring the problem to the fore and understand enough about RPA to know if RPA was a solution. And in trying to explain where RPA was useful, people thought we were going to have, robots like from Lost in Space wandering around the credit union. And I simply said, for the most part, if a human can do it, the bot can do it. And so we looked at applications that way and discovered the use cases as I mentioned, as necessity dictated that we find the use case. So I think my advice would be to, one, learn enough about the technology to understand when it's applicable, and two, to let your business unit leaders know to bring those use cases to you to evaluate whether they're appropriate. And that was my job. I was the tip of that technology spear and knew the technology well enough to know when it could be applied and when it wasn't a good fit.
Yep. I think that's spot on, Steve. And what I would also say is that's really the value that we help along the way. We always like to say that the customer is always the hero of the story. We're just there to help provide. And that's really the value that Lydonia provides to our customers, is really to help them understand the art of the possible, where some of these use cases may be, regardless of where you are in your automation journey. Every organization is going to be at a different. Steve's team was a little bit more advanced. They had researched the technology. They were down the path. We speak to folks on a daily basis that are just getting started and don't know where to start. And that's kind of the secret sauce that we can help with. One of the other things I'll say is, Steve, it was a pleasure to host your team back here in Boston last year. I know you and Nick and the rest of the executive team made the pilgrimage from Bakersfield out to Boston to kind of talk about future waves of automation and other things that we could do and really start to ideate about what it is that we could do together. And I know with your Salesforce implementation, that's taking a big priority right now, but we also host customers here at our Automation Briefing Center to kind of help them figure out what is that second wave, third wave, that future look. once we kind of get the ball rolling, and we'd be happy to help any of you along that journey.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Stephen. I mean, we're just at a place on that path, and certainly we're not at the destination. We know that. We're currently engaged in trying to create centers of automation around RPA and other technologies, and that has been due in no small part to your team sharing with us how to do that.
Well, thank you for that. And again, I think you're spot on, Stephen. I'll turn it back to Liz here. We don't view automation as a one and done kind of thing where you declare victory after automating one process or one workflow. Automation fundamentally changes the way that you do business. It's the way that you look at, right, the human capital you have in your organization and how to extract the most value out of those folks, again, to drive better member experience, drive out costs, improve employee net promoter score or satisfaction, if you will. So it's truly remarkable technology when you think about it, because it hits so many different parts of an organization. So Liz, why don't we shoot over to the next question?
Yep, we have another great question. As we approach and or continue our journeys on automation, are you taking a balanced approach with front of the house and back of the house, or are you focusing on one side more than the other?
Good question. It's not one I'd really considered before. I think we have a tendency to try to solve member experience problems first, and I would say we have favored the member experience over back office experience. However, we are, through the creation of centers of automation, beginning to look at opportunities in the back office, specifically in our central lending and operations center. So I think we'll get there, but I think initially we saw the opportunity with the member experience.
Good. All right. Always good to think of the members first, right? All right. Next question. Our legacy systems are old and slow. Do I need to replace those before implementing RPA or robotic process automation?
Well, based on our experience, I would say no. The bot uses the system just like a human would use the system to interact with your existing product, though it does it much faster. But the speed of your existing systems, I don't think is going to become a deterrent. The bot obviously is not going to run as fast, but I don't see it as a deterrent or something that you need to do before you can invest in RPA.
No, Steve, that's 100% spot on, and that's really a testament to the UiPath platform. And I mentioned the phrase that it's radically different than other technology out there, and that is because it does work with every system, regardless of version, regardless of platform. Anything that a human can access with a keyboard and a mouse, a password and a login, this technology can be leveraged for. So the possibilities are really infinite and endless. It's just a matter of what's slowing folks down, what are some of the challenges, and then the time to architect the solution.
Yeah, that's certainly been our experience.
Great.
All right.
Liz, how we looking?
Good. This all sounds great, but also expensive to manage. I can't hire more people. How do you maintain costs?
Well, we saw enough cost benefit in our mortgage and solar projects to engage Ladonia to do the development work through their UiPath partnership. Going forward, we're upskilling a couple of our in-house developers to be able to create bots without having to go to a third party. We're also upskilling our business analysts to be able to recognize the opportunities when RPA can be applied as a reasonable solution. So we haven't spent any more money on those resources, but we have invested in training, and we look forward to the day when we are able to do that all for ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's central to Lydonia's go-to-market as well, Steve. We have a saying around here, if you give a person a fish, you feed them for a day, but if you can teach that person to fish, you can feed them for a lifetime. What we like to try to do here is we try to work with our customers to help educate them, how to teach them how to fish, because you don't need to have an advanced degree in programming to be able to leverage the platform and leverage these automations. Now, there are some clients, in full disclosure, that don't want to be in that business. They don't want to be in the development game. And we've actually helped them through a very light managed services offering where we can actually help them maintain their RPA environments. But typically what we find, and most organizations are like Steve and Valley Strong, where once they kind of see the power of the technology and they can deploy it and they get their hands wet with the technology, very quickly they realize it's not a Herculean effort to do this. It will take some investment, but should that investment not be desired, there are other alternatives that we help our clients with.
And to that end, we're also, in our digital solutions team is also exploring Studio X, which is a low code solution. So we haven't done anything with it yet, but we're taking a look at it.
Absolutely. What do you think, Liz? Can we do one more question here and then we'll?
Yes, and Bill and Mark, also feel free to jump in as well if you have some commentary. Bill, this one may be a good one for you. So much of this is related to more frontline services. We are looking for using this in the accounting functions, more related to reconciliations to start. Are you currently using this to assist in those accounting department functions as well?
I can speak, broadly for the industry. I think finance and accounting are great places to start as well. I think, there are different considerations for every function. So we certainly see that there is benefit to automating in the accounting department. Typically, though, you have a smaller team handling, a large number of transactions. So when you look at the ROI of the business, we're not affecting revenue, right? We're kind of focused on the operations and the cost side of the equation, as opposed to, how do we focus on the revenue bucket, or how do we help grow operations? So certainly it doesn't have to be an either or scenario. Certainly what I think the most successful clients that I've seen and worked with have done is focus on both, right? I mean, RPA as a whole is a very quick to develop technology. So you are able to kind of have multiple tracks working in parallel.
Great. All right. I think this is a good one to end on. Have you evaluated RPA vendors on the market before deciding on UiPath? Can you please tell us more about your experience and rationale?
We looked at it's been a couple of years, but actually more than that. But we looked at Automate Anywhere. Is that a sound right?
Yep. Close enough.
And a couple of others, a couple of boutique players like Help Systems that had some niche RPA that they were selling, but ultimately it was the strength and the bandwidth of UiPath that made us decide that they were the right place to go, and the depth of their bench certainly was a consideration for us. And so it isn't that we just said, we looked at the Gartner Magic Quadrant and said, there's UiPath, let's do them. We actually went out and kicked some tires before we made that decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, I think you made the right decision as well, because their lead technologically is only accelerated over the last several years. If you look at market share, UiPath is now up, I think, over 10,000 customers globally with over 1.5 million users. They have about a third of the market share, where their closest competitor is, I think, around 11 or 12%. So if you went back a couple of years ago when you started on this journey, that gap was much narrower. So as they've innovated, as they've invested in the platform, we've seen that gap only grow over the last several years. And we're in a unique spot in the industry from a Lydonia perspective, because we have nothing prohibiting us from representing any technology in the automation space. We represent a number of ancillary technologies, but when it comes to RPA, we've bet our business on UiPath, quite candidly. We wanted to attach ourselves to the market leader, and we believe that we are serving our customers' best interest by helping them leverage and deploy this technology in the most efficient manner possible, so that we can accelerate their business results that they're trying to achieve.
Great. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists. Steve Roach, thank you for your partnership, your friendship, and for participating today. Bill and Mark, your industry expertise is greatly appreciated, and thank you so much for joining us. Steve Sadler, as always, thank you as well. And thank you to all those that attended today. We hope that this answered some of your questions. If you still have more, please feel free to reach out. We can schedule a meeting to talk you through and answer those questions. So again, thank you all so much and have a great day.